Здравствуйте, and welcome to the Chernobyl radioactive zone. Finally here, it's a bucket list travel item. I made it. We're already walking through some old towns, kind of fading into history. Very, very excited for today. So let's get radioactive. Come along. So here we are in the main drag of the Chernobyl zone. This is Chernobyl town. This is the sign right over here that you guys just saw. And essentially there's a 30-kilometer zone, a 10-kilometer zone, and there's 2 checkpoints. So we passed the first checkpoint. The idea was to contain the radiation. So they broke this area up into zones. So basically, I'll tell you the whole story of Chernobyl when we get into Pripyat, the largest town in the region. But the idea was to contain the radiation to a certain area and to kick out all the residents of that area. Apparently today, in this area in Chernobyl town, people still work here. Technically it's a ghost town. No one officially lives here, population 0. But over here there's factories that are still working. There are firefighters and police officers and people that work in this area generally. And they're kind of living in this kind of old school, weird Soviet sphere. I mean, look at this van that's passing. It's amazing. Look at that thing. Woo. And then over here we have a old Soviet era militia police kind of car from the old Soviet times. Got the Soviet world, hammer and sickle, all these different things. And then of course you have the gun, this kind of checkpoint. To start us off, here in the center of Chernobyl town, there's a big monument to the 188 villages, towns, and settlements of the 30-kilometer region that are now completely wiped off the map. So here they kind of did this homage to street signs, but also to crosses. So they call this the graveyard of settlements, or the graveyard of cities. So they have all of these cities that no longer exist. Dolgi Lis, or Nove Sharne, or the great city of Derkachi. And on the back here, they really hit home that they no longer exist with the red stripe on the black sign. You'll never see a road sign in Ukraine with black, so they went for a kind of, you know, something different, something to symbolize the loss of these cities. And apparently over 180,000 Ukrainians were resettled, or were supposed to be resettled by the Soviet government, but many of which never received any funds to resettle themselves. All of the documents that they had left as the Soviets pulled them out of their homes were no longer valid, and they said, hey, we need a house. And the citizens of Pripyat, where we'll go in a second, or Chernobyl over here, were basically left to fend for themselves. The Soviet government basically told these people to leave, and then when they required or requested, you know, help from the government, say, okay, where are we going? The Soviets said, sorry, we have nothing for you. And so people returned to this region, especially within the 10-kilometer zone, to resettle themselves, to live in the houses that they had abandoned. And unfortunately, many of those people perished within 5 to 10 years because of the amount of radiation in the zone. Obviously, this area technically is, they give you a Geiger counter here. So this area technically is safe, but the problem is that the soil is very radioactive still. So you can stay here, you can visit at least within the 30-kilometer zone, but anything, you can't really live here because the soil, anything that you interact with, the trees, they're all contaminated with radioactive waste, basically. So our guide has taken us to the old Chernobyl town, where apparently there's still a small group of self-settlers that still live out here, which is actually quite crazy. But on this kind of eerie road that just kind of goes into the forest, you'll find all these abandoned homes, broken windows, kind of fading into the nature. And these are the traditional, like, Russian style dacha village homes with the wooden tops with the blue or green shutters with the little entrance. And it's really interesting here because it's really a forest. It's completely overgrown, but then you'll see these homes just pop out of nowhere. And it's so eerie. This has only been 35 years, but this house you can barely see. The cool part is up here you can still see the street sign, and it's really not that far removed. This whole area is like a time capsule for Soviet life in the mid-1980s. People left and never came back. And this is what you're left with. Kind of these overgrown homes in disrepair. So for understanding the radiation, this is a 0.17, which is pretty normal. Apparently anything between 0.15 and 0.3 is livable. It's reasonable. But anything over that is dangerous for humans to stay in. And they measure the radiation in radiation per hour. So it's how much you consume per hour is what irradiates you. So the problem is here, it's this stuff. It's that the soil, the plants, the leaves, it soaks up all the radiation. So if I was to put this closer to the ground, it would go higher as opposed to having it, you know, just in the air. Geiger counter. There's more homes lost to time. The weirdest part about kind of walking around here is also you can see it's just people's homes and people's lives, refrigerators, stoves, and different things kind of that have been pulled out of this house, probably gutted for parts. We're not that far removed. Makes me wonder what my hometown would look like after being unoccupied for 30-40 years. So just a bit down the road, we found the area of self-settlers. So for example, really well taken care of house. We've got flowers and a garden, Ukrainian flag. This is International Street, Internationala 95. And this person, probably in their 70s or 80s, is just living out here. Typically, the average age of the people who stayed in this region are between 70 to 85, even older. And these are all people who have decided they didn't want to move to Kiev, but to stay in their native land and kind of stay where they're from. And a lot of these people helped during the kind of disaster times in the 80s, and then just decided to stay and enjoy their homes that they had built, their family house that they've lived in probably since the 30s or the 20s. Some obviously didn't take that route. They let their house rot and they never came back. But others decided, hey, why not come back to my house and live off the land as we did for hundreds of years. Now, these people are pretty far out here. And so an interesting thing is that a lot of these, for example, a lot of these people have their own like kind of gardens. So, and they kind of self-sustain their food with chickens, ducks, and things they can grow in their garden. Now you're probably saying like, whoa, like you probably shouldn't have a garden in an irradiated zone. And so every 2 years, scientists from Kiev come up here. They take samples of people's potatoes and tomatoes and whatever, what have you, and they test to see if it's, you know, good and edible. And for some people, they're lucky. Their plot of land is not irradiated to a really ridiculously dangerous point, and they're going to be fine. But other people, unfortunately, have a pretty irradiated plot of land, and they're eating contaminated, irradiated food, which is obviously not good. And no, the mailman does not come here anymore. But this is the street. It's really beautiful. Look at the old dacha-style houses, the village houses that you find all over the former Soviet Union. And people are still taking care of them. We're here now in the center of Chernobyl town. And the cool part is that they decided here in Ukraine to leave this as a kind of like time nostalgia place. So they didn't change anything. So this main street here is called Soviet Street. The street over here is called Lenin Street. Ukraine, after the fall of the Soviet Union, just tried to completely, basically, take their own national identity and kind of bolster it and take away this kind of Soviet past. So they renamed all of these streets, they pulled down all of the statues, they took away all the hammer and sickles. So here is the last statue of Vladimir Lenin, the great Soviet leader, in Ukraine. You would never find this anywhere else, anywhere in this entire country, but they decided to leave this as a monument to the town that stands as a sort of piece of Soviet nostalgia left in the heart of Ukraine. Our next stop is the buried town of Kopachi, where basically we're in the 10-kilometer zone. And within the 10-kilometer zone, they demolished all the houses because they didn't want people coming back to them, and they buried them and put radioactive signs up. So this is a kindergarten, and this is very creepy. And so now inside the 10-kilometer zone, we have our Geiger counter. Inside this building, it's not too bad, but outside it was something like, it was over 1, which is 4 times the normal allotted amount of radioactive kind of material that you should surround yourself with. But we got beds for kids, creepy doll. It's like nightmare fuel. It's really cool because these places are so perfectly preserved from the time period. I mean, this has just been sitting here. Children's book, newspaper. It's crazy. So my guy just told me something super interesting. The buildings in this region, they were either completely destroyed, or if they weren't destroyed, they had these kind of decontaminators come in and sprayed the buildings down with basically this kind of fluid that took the gamma particles kind of off the building. So here it's like, you know, maybe like 3 or 4 times more than what's kind of allowed. But as they rinsed it, they basically just rinsed the radioactive materials off of the building, and it all settled down here at the foundation. So you can see here, that is 5, so it's basically 10 times more radiation. Not good. So the problem with the buildings is that they're still very not safe. It's not the sound you want to hear. I'm in the remnants of an old fish farm that was operational until 2008. Not a lot of people get to see this building. It's kind of like, it's near one of the old reactors that was never finished because of the Chernobyl incident. And at this farm, they were testing, essentially, the long-term effects of what happened to fish due to the radiation, and they also fed the fish to animals and saw what the long-term effects of that would be. But the funny part about this room is that it's covered in alcohol bottles. Vodka, vodka, vodka. It's got a nice little graffiti, and then they were doing different things with the fish. So over here, they were actually keeping pieces of the fish for research and tests in these very sketchy jars. Apparently this was operational since the 80s, it was until about 2008, but the Ukrainian state has no information on what the scientists were actually doing here. So they were certainly drinking. That is definitely true. And researching. And fishing. guys, we've made it. This is it. So this is reactor number 4, the reactor of Chernobyl that exploded. So the backstory is 1986. Actually, this goes back even further, where the Soviets set up nuclear power plants all over the Soviet Union to kind of power the new generation of the Soviet sphere. What happened here was, essentially, they were running a particular type of reactor. If you're really interested in it, you can look it up. But this was very unstable. So the Soviets in like 1975, 1981, reactors around the Soviet Union were failing. And they knew this was a problem, but they kind of kept using it. And so essentially what happened was the reactor became more and more unstable, and as they tried to stabilize it, they ended up blowing it up. So this thing blew up, and what you see over the top here is basically this shell that they've used to contain the radioactive material. There's an older shell that was made in 1986, and the sad part is for the people that had to construct the shell, this is obviously extremely, extremely radioactive. So a lot of the people who built this experienced radioactive, byproducts of sicknesses and illnesses, and a lot of them died, like 6 months, 1 year, 5 years later because of the exposure to radioactive materials. The crazy part was that in order to build this new shell, this is only finished 2 years ago, the international community basically told them to stop operating all of the rest of the reactors. The thing that I learned today that I find absolutely ridiculous is that this was still operational until about 2000. There were other reactors that they were still creating energy from. So this is the story of Chernobyl, and we're gonna go see the big Soviet city of Pripyat next. The very that's what people like to see here, so we're gonna do that. The crazy part about all this, and one thing that the tour guide said that really stuck with me, was that you're basically standing in the biggest nuclear disaster site that ever happened to humankind. And now it seems so normal and so dormant, but it ruined people's lives, thousands and thousands of people, and you can still feel it. It still feels very creepy here. So now we're in Pripyat town, which was kind of this ideal Soviet city that was right next to Chernobyl, and it's probably the most famous kind of place because it is a ghost town. And you guys can see here, everything's just kind of slowly dying. But they built this kind of declassified machinery zone for all of these things that were used in the kind of liquidation of the Chernobyl site. So obviously, once you've used these on highly radioactive materials, you probably should not be using them again. So we've got tanks, we've got fire trucks, we've got tractors, and they're just sitting here slowly rusting and rotting away. The amazing thing that happened here was that these trucks, where you can see they have the radioactive kind of emblem here, were essential in moving tons and tons, thousands of tons of dirt and soil and debris from around the Chernobyl site. And it was all transported about 12 kilometers outside of the original power plant area to a basically mass burial site of radioactive dirt, which they had to, in a sense, dispose of in a way that wouldn't affect the not only people but animals of the region. So they dug out a massive trench and filled it with radioactive material. And these are the trucks that did it right there. This guy, maybe that guy. And you had to think the human cost for these jobs was so high. So many people got radiation poisoning doing these jobs and passed away from cancer or from other organ failures, within a few years of completion of the job, which is terrible. The Soviet Union did a lot of cover-up work. They told the workers it would be safe, that they would have no problems, and they'll pay them well. And because people during the Soviet Union didn't make that much money, in the 80s they were probably making between $60 to $150 in normal cities. Many people jumped at the opportunity to make some money, and those people paid with their lives, unfortunately. Welcome now to Micro District 2 of Pripyat, the perfect Soviet city. This is what remains of a major alleyway. This is what remains of a building, but I want to show you guys something cool. So I've seen these in other videos and I love the nostalgic vibe. These were Soviet voda gazovania, so soda, like sparkling water machines. And the old Soviet citizens would have a cup here, and this would be the communal cup. And here you could put the cup, you could wash it, you could take your old Soviet kopeck, put it in here, that's like a coin, and then you could pick your water. So you could do sparkling water, you could do sparkling water with lemon, and this button apparently never worked. It was just in case these two buttons failed. And you would get your old Soviet glass of sparkling water, you'd stand next to it in your beautiful Soviet town, drink it down Soviet style. I love it. And over here, if we come over here, you can see this is kind of what remains of old Pripyat. Wow. All right. Wow. The old Soviet grocery store. Yikes. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. It's unbelievable, actually.
Dave is shocked. And here we've got the old Soviet phone booth, where you can make your Soviet phone call to your Soviet friends in Moscow. Look at this. I love the colors. Wow. It's wild. And how weird is this place? This place is such an unbelievable time capsule. I mean, look at this. Unchanged. Crazy. We made it, guys. This is the dead center, city center of Pripyat. Now, what you can imagine here is a Dom Kultury, a house of culture filled with people from all over the world checking out the amazing Soviet city of Pripyat. Over here, the Hotel Policia, a beautiful remnant of Soviet architecture. This building over here they called the White House, a place for only the elite Soviet officials to stay when they were coming and touring the Chernobyl facilities. And over here, a little bit farther, is another beautiful example of Soviet architecture with a large hammer and sickle kind of fading away into the distance. It's really weird. I've only been to one other place in the world like this, and this was also in the former Soviet Union in Georgia. There's a city called Tuskal-Tubo. It's kind of this fading glory of Stalinistic spa culture. We can say that. You guys can check that out. I might go back there in a couple months, but this is phenomenal. It's like something straight out of like Modern Warfare or like Call of Duty Black Ops. It's absolutely eerie and beautiful at the same time. And over here, we've got the old Beware emblem. For those of you that watch the old Bald and Bankrupt Chernobyl Mosaic tour, so we've arrived at our last destination for the day. Above me, you can see Chernobyl 2, what they're calling an over-horizon radar station built on a military base that is in the location on a map of a fake preschool, fake summer camp. And what this was supposed to do was this was new Soviet technology that was essentially supposed to alert the Soviets of an intercontinental ballistic missile launched from the United States. Normal radar only operates on the horizon, so they couldn't essentially see the United States as it's on the other side of the world. So what they did was they were building this, and it sent the radar waves, apparently, up and down as opposed to side to side. At least that's from what I understood. And it had the capability, theoretically, of seeing an intercontinental ballistic missile. Apparently, it was never fully realized because of something called the ionic sphere and the way that the ionic sphere doesn't behave. So the Soviet scientists really didn't nail this. But this is the receiver, and then the transmitter device is actually 90 kilometers this direction in a smaller town. Maybe it's to the east, maybe it's to the west, who knows. But one of the most epic, pretty much I don't even know how to describe it. This place is so overwhelming. It's really hard to describe. It's rusted out, it's abandoned, and it's just absolutely massive. If you guys made it this far in the video, I have to say, if you're gonna go any place and kind of have your mind blown in a lot of various ways, Chernobyl's the place for you. It's not just about the radiation, it's not just about the ghost towns, but it's about the story and how 1986 changed the lives of so many people and how it defined an entire generation of Ukrainians, and also about how we in the United States think of the Soviet Union. Everybody learns about Chernobyl, or at least hears about it. And it's a place, it's a kind of this conglomeration of science, of military technology, of human stories, and it's a confluence of all of those things all at the same time. And it's such a wonderful and unique place to have visited, I do have to say. The one thing I will say to wrap this up is, I don't want to sugarcoat it, this is a tourist site. There are definitely some tourists here, and it's good people are visiting it, but this is definitely dark tourism. This is the story of thousands and thousands of people whose lives have been displaced, have been ruined, have been essentially changed forever. A story of people who courageously fought to cover this up to make sure that it wouldn't be an issue in the future and gave their lives for it. It was also the story of a government that didn't protect its citizens, that lied to them, that put them in harm's way. And I don't think that can go, for example, I don't think that can go underappreciated. The story here is very tragic and it's very heartfelt, and it's a whole bunch of people who really had nothing to do with it suffering the consequences of one of man's most botched jobs, is what I can say. So, standing underneath this incredible structure, I'm gonna say thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something new. Ukraine is special, and I'm very happy to be here. We've got some more stuff coming from Kiev, and then we're gonna head down to Odessa. We're gonna go see some Black Sea stuff, so that should be very interesting. If you guys have been to Chernobyl and you think I did it wrong, or you think I did it in a different way than others, let me know in the comments. We can debate. I would love to talk about this in an upcoming podcast, so we'll do that. We're gonna get back to the podcasts also in the next coming weeks. Very excited about that, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. До свидания, and we'll see you in the next episode from Ukraine. Woo!